just like any other ballot. The Texas legislature passed a bill in 1997 allowing Americans in space to cast their vote in the state. And that does it for us today. We will be back with another edition of America Decides tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. The Daily Report with John Dickerson starts right now.
Welcome to the Daily Report for September 17th, 2024. I'm John Dickerson. The Attorney General says the executive branch will spare no resources to hold the responsible parties accountable for lapses connected to the assassination attempt of former President Trump. We'll have the latest details. But the campaign rolls on in this new environment. The candidates are in Flint, Michigan and Philadelphia today. Speaking of Pennsylvania, we hear a lot about fracking. But we're going to talk with a New York Times reporter who wrote a recent piece that made us think maybe we're talking about it all wrong, or at least we're missing the complexity. Pagers in Lebanon explode on the hips of suspected Hezbollah members, killing at least 9. How do you make pagers explode? Instagram puts new rules out for teenagers, so we're going to ask some questions about the development of the teenage brain and what our culture is doing to those brains. Plus, Microsoft says Russia is trying to keep Vice President Harris from the top job. Sean Diddy Combs' newest record is an arrest record, and the federal government shuts down in 14 days. And finally, if you want to qualify for the Boston Marathon, you're going to have to pick up the pace. Just being able to run 26.2 miles is not enough. The Daily Report starts in a moment. Hello, thank you for joining us. We begin our report with the state of Florida pursuing its own investigation into the apparent assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump. The suspect, Ryan Routh, is in federal custody on charges related to firearm possession. As of Tuesday night, he has not been directly charged with threatening the life of the former president. Secret Service agents spotted the barrel of the suspect's rifle in the bushes on Trump International Golf Course in West Palm Beach, Florida, on Sunday. The suspect did not have a line of sight on Trump and fled the scene without firing a shot, though agents fired several at him, which is why he fled. While federal authorities have not found or disclosed a motive, Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis says his state will seek its own answers.
The public deserves to know the truth about how this assassination came to be. And I have directed all state agencies to work expeditiously to be able to uncover the truth in addition to holding this suspect accountable.
While DeSantis proceeds with his investigation, Attorney General Merrick Garland said Tuesday the federal government remains fully committed.
The entire Justice Department, including in particular the FBI, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of Florida, the National Security Division, are all coordinating closely with our local, state law enforcement partners on the ground. We will spare no resource in this investigation.
CBS News national correspondent Manuel Bajorquez is in West Palm Beach, Florida. So, Manny, how could the state investigation differ from what the feds are already doing?
Well, in that statement he issued today, Governor Ron DeSantis alluded to the fact that he doesn't believe that the Department of Justice, which has cases against the former president currently, should necessarily be the only entity carrying out an investigation, and that they would be looking at potentially any state charges that could be brought. At the same time, the federal investigation seems to be really getting into full swing. Some new information for you from a colleague who is on the island of Oahu in Hawaii, who's reporting that at the home of Ryan Routh, the suspect in this case, there were approximately 8 agents, including with the FBI, who appear to be in some sort of search for evidence inside and outside of the home, something that was deemed court authorized by someone on the scene there. We do know that investigators are seeking to speak to other people who knew Ryan Routh, including family members. That is all part of the investigation. Cell phone records, online communications, although yesterday at the news conference they mentioned that at this point they believed he was not acting with anybody else.
And what have we learned, if anything, about the suspect's political views, or I guess specifically his feelings about former President Trump?
Well, he wrote a book. This was a self-published book that was released last year, expressing really in a rambling way his support for Ukraine and how people should be fighting for the sovereignty of Ukraine. But in that book, there was a phrase about essentially letting Iran assassinate the former president. So that's something that investigators will definitely look into. It alludes in the book to having formerly supported President Trump, but then changing his mind, and this Ukraine thing seems to be big for the suspect. We did also, for the first time, hear from a family member. This is the son of the suspect, who is 25 years old, and released a statement to CBS News, a quote essentially saying that he's a good person, has been a hard worker his whole life, and that the son was caught by surprise over what he is accused of doing.
And finally, where do things go from here in terms of this investigation?
Yeah, there is a bond hearing on Monday, followed by a probable cause hearing the following week. But in all of this, again, we point back to the fact that this investigation is in full swing, and that in the future, the prosecutors could issue what is called a superseding indictment, and that could carry potentially more charges related to what they are calling this attempt against the former president's life.
Manuel Bajorquez in West Palm Beach, Florida. Thank you. Congress is considering additional funding for the Secret Service after the apparent assassination attempt on former President Trump. The Biden administration has requested lawmakers approve a short-term funding increase as part of a government spending bill, which needs to pass by October 1st. The money would help the Secret Service sustain current operations while covering additional travel and overtime associated with the presidential campaigns. Earlier, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer was asked about the request.
Look, if the Secret Service believes they need more money, I would be very open to giving them that more money in this bill or the next bill, however quickly we can work it out and get bipartisan agreement.
Schumer was busy on other bills as well. The Senate on Tuesday failed to advance a Democrat-authored bill to ensure the right to in vitro fertilization. The vote was 51-44. 2 Republicans supported the bill, but 60 votes were needed to block a filibuster. A similar vote failed 3 months ago, but Schumer went at it again after Donald Trump expressed support for IVF recently. GOP senators called the bill an election year stunt. Now to the 2024 presidential campaign. We're less than 50 days until Election Day. Former President Trump is back on the campaign trail for the first time after that apparent attempted assassination in Florida. He traveled to Flint, Michigan, a heavily Democratic city in a battleground state, for a town hall. Meanwhile, Vice President Kamala Harris was in Philadelphia, sitting down for an interview with a panel from the National Association of Black Journalists. CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe joins me now from Philadelphia. Ed, let's start with the fallout from that second possible assassination attempt. J.D. Vance, the former president's running mate, echoed the former president's blame, saying that the Democratic rhetoric is responsible for this. How is the vice president responding to that?
John, she was notably not asked directly about what Vance and Trump have suggested when she met with members of the National Association of Black Journalists earlier today. She was, however, asked about what's transpired in Springfield, Ohio over the last 2 weeks or so, the various concerns and rumors about what may or may not have happened to pets in that community because of Haitian immigrants to it. Take a listen to part of what she had to say about all this.
It's a crying shame, literally. What's happening to those families, those children in that community, not to mention what is happening in terms of, look, you say you care about law enforcement resources being put into this because of these serious threats that are being issued against a community that is living a productive, good life before this happened.
So she was especially concerned about the public safety risks to residents of Springfield, Ohio, in the wake of bomb threats phoned into schools in that community in recent days. She pointed out, for example, at least at one school, it had been school picture day, and all the students were dressed up excited and ready to have their pictures taken, only to have to be sent home because of death threats sparked by the focus on that town and its Haitian immigrant community.
What else did the vice president say with this panel of journalists? What are the other highlights?
Well, you know, among other things, she was asked about the war in the Middle East and whether or not there is any leverage to be used against the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. She continued to say that Israel has a right to defend itself, but that she supported withholding big weapons, the 2,000-pound bombs from Israel earlier this year to essentially account for some attacks on civilians. Couldn't give a good answer as to what exactly more she could do to help the Palestinian people. Dodged a question as well on whether she would ever support through executive action a national committee to review the possibility of reparations for the families of slaves, saying instead that Congress should handle that. But also was asked about softening support among black men and what more she might be able to do to win their support. Take a listen.
I think it's very important to not operate from the assumption that black men are in anybody's pocket. Black men are like any other voting group. You got to earn their vote. So I'm working to earn the vote, not assuming I'm going to have it because I am black, but because the policies and the perspectives I have understands what we must do to recognize the needs of all communities.
She also said, John, that she had spoken earlier today with former President Trump about the attempted assassination of him, saying that she wanted to check on him. But when asked whether she thinks that she is safe under Secret Service protection, she said, yes, she feels that she is. But there are many other people, and she called out LGBTQ Americans, immigrants, and women, who she said don't feel safe in this country right now because of things that Trump is saying or policies he implemented as president.
And Ed, I'm going to try and squeak in one last question, which is Pennsylvania is the biggest electoral vote prize among those battleground states. Is there a fast way to think about the way the Harris campaign thinks they're going to win that state, what the trick is to win it?
It's be here as often as possible and be on the airwaves as often as possible. We've had the TV on here at our perch in Philadelphia. We've been seeing ads all afternoon. She's here in Philadelphia today. She was up in Scranton last week. She and her running mate, Tim Walz, will spend plenty of time here in the coming weeks, understanding that to win the 19 electoral votes here produces her easiest path to the White House.
Ed O'Keefe in Philadelphia for us. Thank you very much, Ed. As a reminder, CBS News will host the only vice presidential debate between Senator J.D. Vance and Governor Tim Walz on Tuesday, October 1st. It'll be in New York City. We'll have live coverage on CBS, CBS News 24/7, and Paramount+. Microsoft says Russia has refocused its online influence operations to go after Vice President Kamala Harris. In a blog post Tuesday, Microsoft's Threat Analysis Center said, quote, "We have observed Russia pivot towards targeting the Harris-Walz campaign, with actors disseminating fabricated videos designed to sow discord and spread disinformation about the new Democratic nominee." Meanwhile, Meta said Monday it would ban Russian state media outlets from its platforms. The company, which owns Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp, says the outlets were using deceptive tactics to spread Russian propaganda. A Kremlin spokesperson called the move unacceptable. We go now to the Middle East, where thousands were injured and 9 died after handheld pagers used by Hezbollah members exploded, all at the same time. Explosions happened across Lebanon and Syria on Tuesday. Both the Iranian-backed Hezbollah and the Lebanese government blamed Israel for the attack amid ongoing tensions linked to the war in Gaza. Elizabeth Palmer is in Tel Aviv for us with the latest.
It was mid-afternoon when the pagers went off, apparently simultaneously in at least 3 cities across Lebanon. Hezbollah fighters had no warning. Social media shows the devices going off while they were in shops, driving, even walking down the street. Ambulances rushed hundreds of victims to hospitals. The pagers may be small, but the blasts were powerful enough to shred faces, tear off fingers, and injure torsos. Hezbollah immediately announced who it blamed. An anchor on its TV channel, Al Manar, said, "We hold the Israeli enemy responsible for this criminal attack." One high-profile diplomatic casualty was Iran's ambassador to Lebanon. Iran, of course, is Hezbollah's main backer. Hassan Nasrallah, Hezbollah's chief, had told his men months ago to get rid of their smartphones because Israel could track them. He issued the warning in the wake of several Israeli strikes that had killed Hezbollah commanders. But the low-tech alternative that Hezbollah turned to, these pagers, has proved deeply embarrassing. Hezbollah knows that a very sophisticated sabotage operation got deep inside their equipment supply lines, and it's now bound to respond. Israel and Hezbollah have been trading fire on the border with Lebanon for the past few months. It may turn out that these exploding pagers ignite a much wider war. John?
Elizabeth Palmer in Tel Aviv. Thank you, Liz. You can do quite a few things at the age of 16. Many states let you drive, donate blood, and pay income tax. But what about using social media? Instagram rolls out new rules for teens. A child psychiatrist will help us see inside the minds of kids. Plus, our Camila Montoya Galvez updates us on the latest numbers for migrant encounters at the border. You're streaming the Daily Report.
These are the stories
1, 2, 3, go!
Of we, the people.
We're trying to generate our own hope.
It's a huge deal.
I'm enabling them to feel valued.
Eye on America, weeknights on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good. Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail. What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides. Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
Exclusively on CBS News 24/7, the streaming home of CBS News.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
Crews are struggling to contain multiple wildfires burning across Portugal, the northern part of Portugal. At least 6 people have been killed, including 4 firefighters. More than 50 people have also been injured. Authorities say fire brigades are stretched thin because of the high number of outbreaks. Several European nations have sent in planes to assist the efforts. On the second day of hearings into last year's deadly Titan submersible implosion, the former chief of operations of OceanGate, David Lockridge, accused the company of ignoring science and engineering in favor of making money.
You have to have the confidence in the equipment to do the job. It's like every other industry. If you don't have the confidence in it, you don't do it. That's it.
And did you have confidence in the way that the Titan was being built at this time?
No confidence whatsoever. And I was very vocal about that, and still am.
Lockridge said the company's CEO, Stockton Rush, who was one of the 5 people who died last June on the way to the Titanic wreckage, would often dismiss safety concerns expressed by other engineers and submersible pilots. The families of 3 of the 6 construction workers who died in the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapse are taking legal action against the owner of the ship that caused the accident. They're calling on a federal court to hold Singapore-based Grace Ocean Private Limited liable for the March collapse. Our Camila Montoya Galvez sat down with one of the widows of one of the victims.
Pero sí, pienso que lo correcto sería que haya esa justicia para mi esposo y para los otros 5 trabajadores, que puedan haber leyes más justas.
The families are arguing that the ship should never have left port due to its severe power issues. Lawyers representing the families plan on filing the motion to hold the company liable by September 24th. In an effort to address concerns about the effects of Instagram on developing minds, Meta, its parent company, has created teen accounts that offer a more limited experience for the platform's younger users. Everyone under 16 on Instagram will be automatically migrated to the new service. Their pages will then be made private, and their parents will have more control over the account and will be able to see who their kids are communicating with. 100 million accounts globally will be affected by the change. Dr. Joel Stoddard joins me now for more. He's an associate professor of psychiatry at the University of Colorado School of Medicine, as well as a child and adolescent psychiatrist, at Children's Hospital Colorado. Thank you so much for joining us. Okay, let's start. What's your reaction to what Instagram is doing here?
I think it's an excellent first step. So the teen brain is tuned to develop an identity and understand their social roles. And social media sits at a sweet spot there. So having some sort of guardrails meets kids where they're at.
And remind us about that teenage brain. How are the different ways in which it's affected by these kinds of inputs and kind of what's happening in the teenage brain at this period?
Oh, absolutely. A lot of people say the teen brain is underdeveloped, but really it's optimized for what teens need to do. And that is to sort of form their own identity away from their family of origin and understand their social role amongst many other things. Social media has been a major social advance that sort of hits teens in that sweet spot. They're sensitive to the novelty of it. Brains were sort of developed in smaller communities, so it reacts to social media in the same way as if it were a smaller community. For example, we did a study of anxious teens years ago and found that they were more sensitive to social media and rejection than other kinds of teens are. So there's sort of like an interaction and different vulnerabilities among teens. For a balanced discussion, consider the Surgeon General's recent policy statement, which does suggest that social media companies should be attuned to these changes and have some safety regulations in place.
So in this case, Doctor, the Instagram is kind of choking the inflow, making things private so, weird outsiders can't contact you. But isn't part of this also just plain old access, that if you're developing an identity, you're figuring out what your social role is, the brain operates at one pace and social media operates at a hyper-fast pace? Are those two things incongruous? And is there really anything that Instagram is doing? In other words, if you still have an Instagram account, aren't you still facing that incongruity?
Absolutely. We all have to adapt to social media. That's been a major social change, although our biology hasn't sort of caught up with that. And hopefully we understand that, much like we have regulations on many things in society that keep us safe. One example is simply wearing a seatbelt. When you get into a car, you might not immediately want that seatbelt around you, but we know that seatbelt saves lives and keeps folks safe. Similarly, one of the proposals was to limit when teens can access Instagram. We know that teens are very susceptible to sleep disruption. So having a cutoff of about 10 p.m., though that might not make me popular amongst teens, might be in their best interest.
And finally, Doctor, the attention economy pelts us all, teens and adults alike, with interruptions, bits of flashy, exciting things that draw us away from what we know from all time, which is that focused work is the way to do the best work. That also would seem to be a challenge for kids who are trying to learn how to do focused work in the first place.
Well, I'm sure it's a challenge for us at middle age, but the kiddos are particularly sensitive because it is true. They, as you know, novelty seeking is really important for understanding what your identity and your role is. Like the two major things I was talking about that are important at this stage, and so that helps you seek out rewarding experiences. So. It's well known at this point that social media can tap into that vulnerability pretty well. And maybe a little bit more. Another point that you did touch in on was that having those constant interruptions, or maybe even spending the time on social media, takes you away from other things that you might need to be doing, including having face-to-face interactions, spending time with your family, being maybe a little bit less stressed about your schoolwork because you have time to get it done, or participating in physical activities. I would say, though, that it's really important that in understanding one's role, the Surgeon General's report actually is pretty good. And not to promote it too much, it's just nice to have it consolidated. There are some benefits to teens for social media in there. So we can absolutely regulate it to get the best possible outcome for teens and keep them engaged.
An excellent point of balance there. Dr. Joel Stoddard, psychiatrist at Children's Hospital, Colorado. Thank you so much.
Take care.
The Federal Reserve is expected to announce its first rate cut in 4 years. But what does that mean for you? We'll explain ahead. You're streaming the Daily Report.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team. Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
It didn't seem like anything could happen, because nothing ever happens in East Palestine, but it did.
Authorities released toxic fumes from 5 derailed train cars.
Resident, please evacuate. Acute bronchitis due to chemical fumes.
Did you ever have these problems before the derailment?
No, ma'am.
This neighborhood's not safe no more.
We can assure the community that there's not vinyl chloride entering their communities.
Then why are there so many people feeling these various symptoms of bloody noses or difficulty breathing or bronchitis?
That's a hard question to answer.
We're talking about one of the most blatant releases of a mixture of some of the most toxic chemicals that we've seen in America.
I feel like now I have a duty to warn other communities. If my daughter has to watch me die of cancer, at least it saves someone else.
This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original, 48 Hours, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform.
You can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dragon capsule here in space.
Sightseers in space, the thrill of a lifetime.
Seeing the Earth from space, it was so exhilarating.
But the risks that come with the territory.
There have been 4 fatal accidents. That's a 1% fatal accident rate.
Might make you look before you launch.
If you had 1 out of 100 airplanes falling out of the sky, we'd have a public crisis.
Space tourism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Back to the Daily Report. I'm John Dickerson. Here are some additions to our top stories. As the suspect in Sunday's apparent attempted assassination of former President Trump remains in custody, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis says the state will launch its own criminal investigation. On the federal level, Attorney General Merrick Garland said Tuesday, quote, "We will spare no resource in this investigation." Thousands of people were injured and at least 9 killed Tuesday when handheld pagers used by Hezbollah exploded in Lebanon and Syria. Hezbollah is blaming Israel. The pagers were being used by militants after the group's leader ordered members to stop using cell phones. The investigation into the pipeline fire near Houston reveals the explosion happened after a car drove through a fence and hit a valve. However, authorities have not found any evidence of foul play. Crews worked through the night, but the fire is still burning as of Tuesday evening. That's gas still in the pipeline. For those concerned about immigration in this election year, monthly migrant crossings are a key figure. Numbers from Customs and Border Protection show 58,000 encounters in August. That's a slight increase from July, but apprehensions are still around their lowest level in 4 years. For some added context, last December, the United States saw a record 250,000 encounters along the border. CBS News immigration and politics reporter Camilo Montoya Galvez joins us now for more. So, Camilo, I ask you this all the time, but I'll do it again. Why are these numbers down?
Well, John, it is a combination of different factors. We know that in June, President Biden invoked his presidential powers to issue the sweeping executive action that has effectively suspended the asylum process between legal entry points along the U.S.-Mexico border. Right now, fewer migrants are being allowed to request humanitarian protection here in the U.S. after crossing the border illegally, and fewer of them are also being allowed to be released into the country with notices to appear in immigration court. And that has been a seismic change in policy, John, because as you know, these mass releases of migrants into the U.S. interior have been happening over the past few years, and officials have perceived them to be a pull factor that attracts migrants who may not have valid claims, but who are able to stay here because the U.S. cannot deport them to their home countries like Venezuela, or the asylum system is so backlogged that it cannot adjudicate their cases in an expeditious and quick manner. And so this is a dramatic change in policy that officials have been crediting for this massive drop in encounters at the border. But we also have to mention, obviously, that Mexican officials have ramped up efforts to stop many migrants from boarding buses and trains to get to the U.S. And of course, this summer, temperatures have been increasing very rapidly, and that is making the trek across the border even more difficult and potentially deadly for many migrants on the journey north. And again, the open question now, John, is whether that number continues to plateau in the coming weeks or if it increases, as historically has been the case in the fall.
So we're coming up on the fiscal year is ending for Border Patrol. What do you think the whole number will be like for the entire fiscal year in terms of migrant encounters?
Well, Border Patrol is on track to record about 1.5 million migrant apprehensions between legal entry points in fiscal year 2024. That will be the lowest tally for the agency under the Biden administration. So that is good news politically for an administration that has been plagued by massive levels of illegal immigration at the border. And it's also good news politically for Vice President Harris, who, as you know, has been trying to strike a balancing act on this tricky issue for Democrats in the election. But it is still a very high number, make no mistake about it, John, and it is still a historically high level of migration, especially because of what we saw in December, which is included in this fiscal year, when, as you know, 300,000 people were processed at and in between ports of entry along the border, a record high. So yes, this is good news politically for the administration, and it is a significant change, but it is still a very high number, John.
You previously reported, Camilla, that the triggering mechanism in the executive order, which would allow these asylum claims to be start coming back, or was going to change a little bit, that the administration was going to make it even harder. Can you explain that again for me?
Sure. So right now, that executive action that I mentioned that has severely restricted asylum at the border is contingent on border numbers staying above 1,500 over a 7-day average. If they drop below that threshold, the asylum restriction deactivates. However, now the Biden administration, we have learned here at CBS News, is considering amending that regulation, John, to make it even harder to deactivate. And that would be done by changing the conditions for deactivation. And one of the plans, John, that we have learned here at CBS News that they are considering is to now make it so the policy would only lift if that 1,500 number is there for at least 28 days, not just a week, not just 7 days. So obviously, that is something that has not happened in many, many years, and it is unlikely to happen anytime soon, especially before the election. And so this would really extend the policy indefinitely, and it is very likely that if, for example, Vice President Harris wins the election, that the policy would continue indefinitely. And obviously, if former President Donald Trump is elected and returns to the White House, we should also expect asylum restrictions at the border.
Camila Montoya Galvez, thank you so much, Camilo.
Thanks.
Schools in Springfield, Ohio are getting added security following a recent string of bogus bomb threats. Ohio Governor Mike DeWine announced Monday that Ohio state troopers are being sent to the small town of less than 60,000 people. The bomb threats started last week following the presidential debate when Donald Trump repeated lies about Haitian migrants in the city kidnapping and eating people's pets. Since last week, there have been at least 33 bomb threats across the school in the area. There are only 18 school buildings in the district. City Hall and 2 hospitals were also targeted. Governor DeWine suggested at least some of the threats are coming from overseas adversaries, using the story as a, quote, opportunity to mess with the United States. I spoke with the director of CISA about this last year, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, for those who don't know, about how, as Americans, we should be reacting to this sort of cyber mischief from overseas.
So we need to be prepared for that. We need to be resilient to it. You saw Colonial Pipeline, you saw the high-altitude balloon. That was not a great time for America to show that resilience. And it's really important that we recognize there will be disruptions. We need to be able to work through them and to work together as a unified American people to deal with these adversaries.
Music mogul Sean Diddy Combs will remain in jail as he awaits trial in his sex trafficking case. A judge denied the 54-year-old's request for a $50 million bond during his first court appearance Tuesday. Combs has pleaded not guilty to new federal counts of racketeering, conspiracy, sex trafficking, and transportation to engage in prostitution. CBS News national correspondent Jerika Duncan was inside the courtroom.
Good evening to you, John. After hearing the news that bail was denied, Combs looked back at his 3 sons who were sitting about 3 rows behind him and patted his chest. When I asked his attorney what Combs said to him after that news, he said, quote, I'll see you tomorrow. Why? Because they will be back in court tomorrow to fight that bail denial. This afternoon, though, Combs walked into court wearing a black T-shirt and gray sweatpants. He kept his focus mainly on the judge and at times looked at his attorney when he was speaking. The 54-year-old hip-hop mogul was charged with sex trafficking, racketeering, and interstate transportation for prostitution following a months-long Homeland Security investigation. Prosecutors allege that Combs used his business empire to force women to engage in sexual acts with professional sex workers at events he called freak-offs. It was there that prosecutors say Combs was violent toward the women, alleging he would hit, kick, and even throw objects at them while dragging victims by their hair. The allegations in the indictment focus on one victim in particular. It appears to be the same victim named in that civil lawsuit in which Combs settled last November with his longtime former ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura. In the beginning, Combs denied those allegations of wrongdoing, but when video surfaced in May of this year, about 6 months after that settlement in November, it showed him hitting and kicking and dragging Ventura at a hotel. He later would go on to apologize. The attorney for Ventura, Doug Wigdor, was in court today. He had no comment, but again, Combs is expected to be back in court tomorrow as his attorney plans to fight that bail denial. John?
Jerika Duncan, thank you. On Wednesday, the Federal Reserve is expected to announce its first interest rate cut in more than 4 years, which could bring some relief to the finances of millions of Americans. The current federal funds rate stands at a range of 5.25% to 5.5%. That's the highest in 23 years. Economists expect the Fed to lower rates by either a 1/4 percentage point or potentially a 1/2 percentage point. This means rates for car loans, home mortgages, and credit cards could likely go down. Currently, the average rate on a 5-year car loan is over 7%. The 30-year fixed-rate mortgage for a home is about 6.2%. Coming up throughout the presidential campaign, we hear a lot about fracking, but are the right questions about energy being asked? We'll speak with a New York Times correspondent about the natural gas issues in Pennsylvania. You're streaming The Daily Report.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail.
What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides on CBS News 24/7.
Stream our expanded 1-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable.
The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Process of fracking, where fluid is injected in underground rock formations to extract oil and gas, has been much discussed in the 2024 presidential campaign because it's a component of the economy in the key battleground state of Pennsylvania. But residents there say the presidential conversation often misses the mark when it comes to energy logistics and pricing. In southwestern Pennsylvania, natural gas prices have dropped roughly 80% in the last 2 years after they increased when Russia began its invasion of Ukraine. Given that more than a third of the residents live in counties where that gas is extracted, a drop in prices means people who signed off to allow drilling on their property aren't getting paid as much. The decline in prices also means a decline in jobs as the industry slows. Rebecca Elliott is an energy correspondent for the New York Times and recently wrote a piece about this issue. Rebecca, welcome. Thanks for being here. This is a really interesting piece, full of lots of complexities. Why are gas prices lower now?
Sure. So we saw natural gas prices shoot up, of course, after Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022. And since then, they've come back down. One big factor is that in many parts of the United States, including in Pennsylvania, we're just awash in gas, and it can be very difficult to transport that natural gas from one place to another.
And the war in Ukraine, so prices originally went up. Why? Because Russian gas was no longer on the market, and so there was scarcity, but now everybody's learned how to deal with a world in which you don't have access to Russian gas, and that's brought the price down again. Is that kind of what happened?
Right. And in the U.S., we have lots and lots of gas resources, including in the Northeast, in the Marcellus, which runs beneath Pennsylvania and other neighboring states. We've become very good at getting that out of the ground through, as you mentioned, fracking, which is horizontal drilling, and hydraulic fracturing.
And so for those who, and also explain the process of getting gas to market for people in Pennsylvania and why that is actually the challenge. So it's not getting it out of the ground. There's plenty of that happening. Explain this other challenge.
So natural gas, which is used to heat homes, to cook on a stove, to generate electricity, it's challenging to move around. Typically, we do it via pipelines or on tankers that cross the ocean. You can't just load it onto a truck very easily. And in many parts of the United States, it has become very, very difficult to build pipelines, particularly when doing so involves crossing through multiple states, needing sign-off from a range of different authorities. And so what you have in Pennsylvania and elsewhere in the country is pockets where the price of natural gas is very depressed, and in some cases, well below the cost of production.
And is this a federal issue that a president can have anything to do with, this transportation of natural gas, making it easier, or is it essentially a state issue that various different states have to get together on?
It is not an easy fix, in part because kind of getting long-haul pipelines approved requires input, of course, from federal regulators, but state authorities and local authorities also, in many cases, have a say as well. And so this is something that a president could work on, but it's not like you could go in and change it overnight.
And finally, quickly, Rebecca, in your piece, you also talked about this tension between, so Donald Trump says he's going to cut energy prices in half. The tension between farmers who want their energy prices that they pay to keep their lights on low, but they want gas prices to go really high. Explain that a little bit.
Energy politics are really complicated in energy producing states. You've got, I mean, everyone is a consumer. And as a consumer, you and I want energy costs to fall or generally be low. However, if you're in the business of extracting energy, or, for example, you're a landowner who has agreed to have natural gas extracted on your property and you get a cut of those revenues, you would prefer for natural gas prices to rise or be higher. And so as a presidential candidate, you've got to kind of think about both of those elements and the competing interests there.
Rebecca Elliott with the New York Times. Thank you so much for your reporting.
Thank you for having me.
In recent years, more than a dozen state governments have reduced degree requirements for government jobs, favoring skills-based hiring to include workers with non-academic experience from military service, apprenticeships, or on-the-job training. Vice President Kamala Harris has proposed doing the same thing for federal jobs. About 10,000 federal jobs are currently open to the public. 75% typically require a bachelor's degree, but only 37% of American adults have one. The goal is to meet the hiring need, open opportunity, and make the government workforce more representative of the general population. Still to come, the Cape Crusader is being honored in Hollywood. We will unmask the story ahead. You're streaming The Daily Report.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. And reach for the stars.
Here we are. Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking,
I'm open to the idea of being a human being.
innovative, and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go. With the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes, real lives, real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Nations are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's gonna be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm gonna remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was gonna be born, he was only gonna live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift, stream now on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
CBS News investigation. People looking for love, finding their life savings gone.
This could happen to anybody.
And sometimes losing their lives. Anything for love. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
You're going to need to get faster to run the 2026 Boston Marathon. Boston Athletic Association announced Monday that all qualifying runners age 18 to 59 must be 5 minutes faster than in recent years. Men aged 18 to 34 will have to run a qualifying marathon in 2 hours and 55 minutes, or approximately 1 mile every 6 minutes and 40 seconds. Women and non-binary runners in the same age group have to finish within 3 hours and 25 minutes in the qualifier. That's about 1 mile every 7 minutes and 49 seconds. But just qualifying for a race that everybody wants to run in isn't enough. The cutoff times, which are different, are usually shorter and determined by the limited number of spots each year with so many people wanting to run. Halle Berry wants us all to be more candid when it comes to discussing menopause. In an interview on CBS Mornings promoting her new film, Never Let Go, the 58-year-old actress said it's become her favorite new topic after a particularly scary incident.
First of all, I found out I was in menopause in the most horrific way. I was diagnosed with with herpes instead of a menopausal symptom. I said, I'm going to stand up for me, and when I stand up for me, I know I'm going to help other people. And then it just started snowballing, and I realized that only we women can destigmatize this by talking about it.
Yes.
Making it okay, talking about it with our husbands, our partners, our sons, our co-workers. We have to give them permission to talk about it also.
And so she has. Berry also spoke about the beauty of aging and said that getting older is a privilege. Batman, the Caped Crusader, is getting a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame next week. While he's not the first fictional character to get a star, Batman will be the first superhero to receive the honor. The Dark Knight's star will be placed next to Adam West's. Adam West played Batman in the 1960s TV show. His other neighbor will be Bob Kane, who co-created Batman with Bill Finger in 1939. Here's a look at some of the stories we're covering in our next hour. Investigators are still trying to figure out a motive for the suspect in an apparent assassination attempt of former President Trump. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has ordered his own investigation. Pagers used by Hezbollah explode at the same time, wounding thousands. The group is pointing the finger at Israel. And Meta gives Instagram a makeover for its youngest users, a look at the changes for teens and how they relate to developing young minds. You're streaming CBS News.
Okay, so let's just start at the beginning.
Well, let me start with this.
What is at stake here?
What is the answer then?
Do you know why?
You want me to just keep going?
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Were there death threats?
How is this possible?
What's wrong with that argument?
Are you saying they lied?
Have you told the government that? Why won't you say the word crisis?
You're not answering my question.
This really
Is that scary?
Does that make sense?
What do you mean?
What does that mean in
Did
English?
any of that make sense?
What's your response?
What happened? Why?
It's time for the CBS News Original 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS and streaming on Paramount+.
There is no more room in our city.
New York City is receiving record numbers of migrants.
Today, we're going to have more than 500 adults and children come through that door.
Tensions rise as shelters reach max capacity.
We don't have to take care of them.
CBS Reports goes inside a crisis cities and families are facing as they fight to survive.
The United States still has that glimmer of hope for people to come here.
Fighting for a future. Now streaming on the free CBS News app. An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Since you started La Soup in 2014, do you have any sense as to how much food you've rescued from the landfill?
We've rescued 4.5 million pounds.
I can't even fathom how much food that is.
And that's one little person in one little city in America. We're going to call this chicken piccata. We did 450 of these meals today.
This is the exact dish that you and I are going to have.
Yep.
Oh, really good.
Is it good? Mm-hmm. Having a plan of how to keep people fed should be in every single city.
So if we eliminated food waste, could we eliminate
hunger? Yes.
Eating Trash, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail. What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides on CBS News 24/7.
Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
When people say who's first to get in the morning, that would be me. Morning news matters because it sets the tone for your day, and it's a way of getting you started.
Day to day, that first draft of history, it happens right here.
We're going to uplift you. We're going to send you out your way.
We take you places, we teach you new things, and we make you feel like, it's not all bad.
People say to me, you always seem to be having a good time. And you know what? You're right.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
I'm John Dickerson. Join me for the Daily Report, weekdays on CBS News 24/7.
She's the first black woman on the Supreme Court, and she's determined she won't be the last.
My parents had raised me to believe that I could do anything I wanted to do.
Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson on Person to Person.
Welcome to the Daily Report for September 17th, 2024. I'm John Dickerson. The Attorney General says the executive branch will spare no resources to hold the responsible parties accountable for lapses connected to the assassination attempt of former President Trump. We'll have the latest details. But the campaign rolls on in this new environment. The candidates are in Flint, Michigan and Philadelphia today. Speaking of Pennsylvania, we hear a lot about fracking. But we're going to talk with a New York Times reporter who wrote a recent piece that made us think maybe we're talking about it all wrong, or at least we're missing the complexity. Pagers in Lebanon explode on the hips of suspected Hezbollah members, killing at least 9. How do you make pagers explode? Instagram puts new rules out for teenagers, so we're going to ask some questions about the development of the teenage brain and what our culture is doing to those brains. Plus, Microsoft says Russia is trying to keep Vice President Harris from the top job. Sean Diddy Combs' newest record is an arrest record, and the federal government shuts down in 14 days. And finally, if you want to qualify for the Boston Marathon, you're going to have to pick up the pace. Just being able to run 26.2 miles is not enough. The Daily Report starts in a moment. Hello, thank you for joining us. We begin our report with the state of Florida pursuing its own investigation into the apparent assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump. The suspect, Ryan Routh, is in federal custody on charges related to firearm possession. As of Tuesday night, he has not been directly charged with threatening the life of the former president. Secret Service agents spotted the barrel of the suspect's rifle in the bushes on Trump International Golf Course in West Palm Beach, Florida, on Sunday. The suspect did not have a line of sight on Trump and fled the scene without firing a shot, though agents fired several at him, which is why he fled. While federal authorities have not found or disclosed a motive